That was stressful. I thought you could record lives as like horizontal, but apparently you can't. So we're gonna do this again. Um, that's really annoying. I'm not going to lie, but this is all about my Saturn square. So of course, this is happening because it wouldn't be a Saturn square if it wasn't. Hello. Um, so I'm just sorting out the information here that I have, and I just want to put my can I speak? Can I speak? My comment for the post. Okay. So I have no idea if people will join this. There is one person here. Hello. I wanted to speak about this because I have been going through my Saturn square this week exact. Now, a square, just like a return, lasts for the entire time that that planet is in that sign. However, you have an exact degree, and my exact degree just happened this week, and I wanted to kind of talk about my own personal experience and what that meant like, but then also help you understand this square more and understand things that are going on with it. If you want to understand Saturn as a whole and understand what Saturn in a house means, in its home placement, or in full detriment, whatever, I have basically my whole free workshop, which is in the link in the comments. So click that. Oh my goodness, 16 people, that updated so quickly. What? Hello, where are you all from? Comment, please, 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 let me know. I have no idea. Your Grace, please, no disgusting comments. We will block you and report you. There you go, you're gone. I'm not messing about. Hello, welcome. So we are talking about Saturn square. We are talking about my relationship with the Saturn square this week and what has been going on. And we have, so Saturn with its placements or aspects, Saturn with its aspects happen once every 7.5 years. And with that, you have, I just realized I've got my mic. So please, please, please let me know if you can hear me, because I didn't even check. I was so nervous coming on here because this is my first live, and I was nervous because then it wasn't working and it wasn't working this way, and I was just like literally freaked myself out. But anyway, Saturn square is one that happens around 21, 22 years old, and then 36, 37-ish, depending on what degree your Saturn is. But if you have Saturn in Sagittarius natally, you went through your Saturn square just when Saturn was in Pisces. Hello, welcome. So this is just about what that Saturn square means, what kind of brings, but then also my lived experience, because I've been going through it since Saturn entered Aries, and it's nothing like I thought. I really freaked myself into a Saturn square when actually it was way less intense than I really thought. So we're going to go into it and kind of unpack the Saturn square because I don't see many people talking about it. They talk about Saturn return, and the return is important, but the square comes after the return. If you didn't listen to your return, if you didn't take responsibility of what you needed to take responsibility of, the square will come and just remind you. It's not as um I'm not going to use I don't want to use the word intense, but it's the only word that I can think of. Um it's it's just this kind of reminder. But if you have been listening, then it's a really like empowering reminder. But if you haven't, that's where the pressure comes from. The square is the pressure of the old self and the new self, or the old beliefs and the new beliefs, the old identity versus the new identity. So we're going to go through it. So I'm just looking over at my notes because I wanted to make sure I do not ramble, because I tend to do that. Okay, so I just said that I was petrified of my Saturn square, and my top note was like not the fear-based version of a Saturn square. So the Saturn square, like I said, is just the pressure between the two houses, the relationship between the two houses that you're having. So where your natal Saturn is, and then the square would be the opposite. So for instance, I have an Earth natal Saturn. So when Saturn goes into the next, not the next sign because that's air, but the next sign that would be fire, which is Aries, I would have a square. Then when it goes into Cancer, which is again a water sign, it would go an opposition. And then when it would go up to Libra, air, it's a square. And then it comes to Earth and it's a conjunction. So that's kind of wherever your Saturn is, it's always basically, if you use the way your Saturn is as the first house, it's always the fourth house, then the seventh house, then the 10th house, then the first house again. If you had Saturn in your second house, you would have a square. You would have a square when Saturn was transiting your fifth house. You would have an opposition when Saturn was transiting the eighth house, and you would have a square again when Saturn was transiting the 11th house. And then you would have a conjunction when Saturn returned back to your second house. The square happens twice, the opposition and the conjunction happen once in that 29.5 year cycle that Saturn takes to transit all the zodiac signs. So that's what a square is. A square is when it gets to a certain house. So again, if you had Saturn, if you've just had Saturn transiting Pisces and you have Saturn in Sagittarius, you have just gone through your Saturn square. And now that Saturn is in Aries, you will go through a Saturn trine, which is lovely. So the square is basically the tension between what those areas of your life mean. So for me, it was my fourth house and my first house. It was like, what am I going to take responsibility of? What am I going to no longer allow? What am I going to take action on, and not just hope one day it'll get better, or wait for something to change, or hope for someone to save me? It was like taking authority of how I'm going to change my life, how I'm going to change my home life, my inner world, my roots. And if there's anything that can guide me through that, and if there's anything that I need to completely get rid of, that doesn't mean like people necessarily. It just means the kind of habits, routines that you might be doing, the way you've been speaking to yourself, anything like that, Saturn will kind of get rid of. And again, if you're 36 to 37 ish, you will be going through your Saturn square. So, or you're going through it like literally you've been through it, like I am in it right now. So it could be that as well. If you have Saturn in Capricorn like me and it's in the early degrees, then you'll be going through your square. And if you have Saturn in Cancer, you will also be going through a square. Yeah, yeah. I need to double check that in my head. Okay, so like I said, the houses that were meant for me. Yeah, I remember you saying your Saturn was in Cancer. So you are going through your Saturn square right now. What degree is your Saturn? If you know, if you don't worry about it. Um, but mine is at 7 degrees. Um, oh, so you've got like yeah, towards the end. So maybe late next year or mid next year would be your Saturn square. You're going through it now regardless. Saturn, it's just like what I said earlier, Saturn return. Um, the return is the duration that Saturn is in that house, in that sign. So the duration of Saturn in Aries is our Saturn square. But the exact point where might be where you feel more pressure with that. So my exact point has been this week, and it wasn't how I thought it would be because I think I overhyped it a little bit in my head, and I think I made myself feel like I'm not showing up for myself and I'm not showing up for where I want to go in my life, and I actually am. And it was much less kind of pressure as a square would normally be. Um, so that's why I said, like, it's not what I expected. I didn't expect my Saturn square. Obviously, I'm still got 2 years left of it, but like, I didn't feel the pressure that I thought I was going to feel when Saturn um, hit that exact earlier this week. I I realized the lesson before that. And it was really hilarious to me because as soon as Saturn entered Aries, it was like an inner knowing of like, what are you going to take responsibility of now? What are you going to let go of? Who are you going to show up as? No one's going to come save you. No one's going to change your life. You are. So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to take responsibility of? And I started showing up as her. I started showing up more as what I want to take responsibility of and how I'm going to show up with that. And I, it just started to naturally change. It started to, like, I started to do things. I go into this in a video next week and I'm really excited about that video. But I started to stop acting as my old self and what my old self would do. And I started realizing it was like a glass ceiling cracked. And I was just thinking, I'm not acting in some ways as I am responsible for my life. I'm acting still as if someone is going to come save me or someone's going to sort something out. That's just not the case. Unless you are, and like, really, even if someone could help you and save you, and not save you, but you know what I mean. You still have to take action on your life and how you show up on a daily basis. Um, and that is the Saturn square, is what you're going to be responsible for now. You are no longer going to show up as the person who was struggling in the way that she used to struggle. That's not you anymore. And, the fourth house axis, when Saturn is in that fourth house, it's building the foundation from a completely new stance. It is no longer coming from a place of like how your family used to be or what your roots used to be or the trauma of that or what your parents taught you in life. You're starting from your own new ideas and your own new ways of thinking, believing, and how you are now going to show up as that. and that new version, what things did your parents talk about? You know, those are the questions that I asked myself, which I've done for a really long time, um, with inner work, is how are you going to release the version of you that your parents, your caregivers, society, whatever, taught you to be? And what are you going to believe in? What are you not going to believe in? And how are you going to act now? Now you know all that information. And Aries is fiery, it's punchy. It is going to um, want you to take action. This is where you could easily kind of give up. Like, I could easily get the momentum and then in a month's time be like, eh. But the Saturn within Saturn in Aries is the reminder to keep showing up, to keep being consistent, to take responsibility, to no longer um, be in a space where you are, I'm trying to think of the right words, you are, yeah, you're no longer just basically being the same, the version of yourself that you used to be, and you're taking action on that, you're being responsible for that, you are not, you're doing the things that scare you, you're taking the steps without overthinking it. That's Aries. Aries is like, I take action, don't care what happens. Saturn is like, no, 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 we care what happens afterwards. We keep going. So when Saturn is in Aries, yes, it's in its fall. Yes, it's not happy in Aries. But I think Saturn in Aries is like the perfect mix of action and sustainability. When Saturn was in Pisces, it was like lack of boundaries completely. Um, So maybe that was you not setting boundaries for yourself, you know, but Saturn in Aries is like, okay, we've got all the information we need to have had from the last 29 years. Let's start again. Let's start from scratch. Let's do it. Let's um, go forth now, taking action and no longer not doing things because we're scared and we fear whatever that might be, because Saturn is a slow mover. Saturn isn't impulsive. Saturn can make you feel like you have to wait. Sometimes I've spoken about this in a different video. So when when Saturn enters Aries, it has to fight. Um, how do the planets influence behavior? Um, I don't really think they influence behavior. I think they are who you are, and when you start to tap into that energy, you're no longer forcing yourself. Um, so you know, speaking of Saturn square, as soon as I realized that like my Saturn is in Capricorn, and it's okay for me to be structured and devoted, and oh, that's lovely. Shall we just block you? God, people are wild. Um, anyway, so I will just go back to what I was saying because um anyway, so the Saturn in Aries is taking action and being responsible for that action, showing up differently in that area of your life, taking responsibility for that area of your life. I go deep into this in the Saturn workshop live next week. So if you want to join, make sure to sign up below. Um, the next bit that I wanted to talk about was I kind of feel like I've already spoken about this. Again, I went on a bit of a ramble, but is showing up for what you've built, even if you're not getting validation from it, even if you're not seeing the rewards from it, showing up for what you said you would show up for. I think about this when it comes to, certain things within like fitness and things like that. Is are you showing up as your like are you showing up for what you want? Like you might not get results. Body recomp takes 6 months. Sometimes for people it takes 2 years. Are you showing up for that? Are you taking responsibility and making sure that you show up for it, even if you can't see anything yet? That's Saturn. Like I always think about weight training, body recomp as a Saturn thing. People want the quick fix, but that's just not what body recomp is. It will not create a quick fix for you to get to like your ideal body unless you've got super amazing genetics. Um, and that's the energy of Saturn. That's the energy of a Saturn square is, and again, you have to really analyze your Saturn natal planet and your Saturn transit house. So for me, again, first, fourth house energy. So that is about how I show up differently. And am I going to keep bringing things from the past, things from my family, things from that were not mine to carry? Am I going to keep bringing those into the version of me that is going to move forward now? And this adds like a lot more energy because Saturn entered Aries, and because that's obviously the first sign of the signs. So Aries is now the beginning, new cycle. Saturn in Aries is now the new next 29 plus years of a cycle. So it's like, are you going to stop showing up as the way you did before? You're going to let that go, let it burn, let's start again, let's start fresh. You show up for yourself now. And that is that kind of energy. Um, okay, so I feel like I've spoken really in depth, but maybe a bit rambly, um, about what a Saturn square is. And I kind of wanted to finish with um, how you could actually use this energy. And the main things are you literally have to sit there and ask yourself, is there anything that I'm holding on to within my identity, within the way I show up on a daily basis, within my relationships, within my work, wherever your Saturn is and wherever the transit Saturn is like we are no longer going to continue that path. So I actually had a client this morning and it was Saturn in the second house, and I was talking to her about this. And if you have Saturn in the second house and you have a square with it, um obviously the square would be the fifth house or the 11th house. Yeah. Um, if you have that, it's the fifth house and the 11th house are telling you a story there, but the second house is primarily to do with money, to do with your self-worth, to do with the way you act around money. And most likely when you have Saturn in the second house natally, you do have a scarcity mindset. It's something that you actively have to work on, whether that's you avoid your bank account, literally don't go near it, or you avoid doing your finances, doing your financial check-ins, like making sure you save. If you don't do any of that, a Saturn square will put pressure on that, like no other. um and it will make that harder. And that's why I think people feel a certain way about Saturn, is because if you're not doing the same with Pluto, and I've said this before, if you're not doing what they want you to do, and if you look at that house, the first thing that comes up in your head or your body, that is what you should be working on. This isn't a magical answer. This is literally your life experience and what you've been going through. So if you're looking at that and you're like, "Oh, that's it. That's it." Like, that's what you need to be working on. And when you haven't been working on it, when you haven't been implementing it, and it can be small, it can be like you're showing yourself that you can show up for yourself. You're showing yourself that you can, you know, work on your finances. You can do a financial tracker. You can save. You can release the scarcity mindset. All of that takes deep inner work. This is not something that you can do um, just by repeating daily, like, oh, I'm abundant or whatever. Like, that may help. But if you have trauma there, or if you have a lot of things that are going on internally and you have blocks, you have to get to the root of those blocks. That doesn't always mean that you need to find out exactly where they come from. You just need to identify what they are and then work through that and be like, okay, now what is my relationship with finances? What is my relationship with abundance? And you can kind of understand that through those questions and through that deep inner work to understand what you need to work on. But if you do not work on that and a Saturn square happens, it's just going to highlight that a lot more and it's going to put pressure on it. It's not something that's going to um it's not something that's going to easily happen overnight or something that's going to be really quick. It will take those 2 years that Saturn was in that sign that was creating that square. But when the transit Saturn is squaring your natal Saturn, it just is highlighting whatever you are avoiding, whatever you're not putting energy towards, whatever you want to do, it will create tension there between those houses. And that's why I said, like, it's not what I thought. I I think I hyped my Saturn square up a bit too much in my head because I had my Saturn return like was not. I speak about this in my workbook, but like my Saturn return was not what I didn't know about. I didn't know about kind of Saturn returns back then as much. Um, and I didn't really listen. I didn't really implement anything. So my return was not what other people probably would focus on if they were able to, if they knew that information. So the square is like, okay, now I'm going to show up differently because like this is important. This is Saturn is my chart ruler. Saturn is in my first house, or my ascendant ruler. And that implements a lot of areas in my life. So I'm not going to act in the same way as I did before now because I know that I have to take responsibility for where I am going in my life. I have to no longer act as the person before because Saturn will burn that down if you did, if you kept performing, if you kept trying to be in a certain job when you know it's not for you, if you weren't moving towards where you want to be in any way, even if it's like daily little habits, Saturn will burn that shiz down. um, and I've been there, like, I left my 30s, like 27, 28 years old. I was in like a 7-year relationship. I had a job. I had friends. I had all this stuff, but I was avoiding like the truth of it, which was like, I'm performing all of this stuff. I'm not actually, like, I didn't enjoy a lot of parts of that life. And at the end of when I turned 30, about 2 months into 30, just before 30 actually, so 2029, we ended that relationship, and then at 30 years old, I it didn't all happen at once, but I would say within a year, I had lost my job, I had lost friendships, I had lost a relationship. I was completely alone and there was a lot of solitude, and that was completely Saturn. Saturn will do that if you're not listening to what Saturn wants you to do. So I made this video, I went live because I was like thinking about the Saturn square that I've been going through, and I'm so proud of myself because I've been like really listening to what Saturn wants me to do, and I've been really moving forward with that. So I wanted to share, and maybe more people will watch this once the live's finished. But I really wanted to share it because I just thought, someone might be going through their Saturn square like you are right now. And you'll it's asking you of what you're going to take responsibility of now, and you no longer are going to act as um the version of you that you were before. um and how are you going to do that? How are you going to implement it and act before you overthink? Hence why the live, this was a day decision, and everything has been going wrong. My internet has completely died, my data maxed out, I had to sort stuff out, and it just was a mess. But I was like saying to myself, this is acting before waiting. You're not waiting for a perfect moment, you're doing it now. And this shows not only Saturn and the universe and like myself, but also like my nervous system. It shows that I can show up and I can do that. And my old self wouldn't do that, but now I do that. So it's different. Um, so yeah. And I already answered that. I did not stay to these bullet points one bit. Um, but yeah. Is there any questions from people who actually give a shit about astrology? If you do, then leave me a question. But if not, then that's fine. I'll leave it. I'll leave it for like 5 minutes and then I'll sign off. Um, Anyone have a question? Obviously, it doesn't necessarily have to be about Saturn, but if you've got any questions about Saturn, first house, any tips? So that's your 10th house, career. Is there any way that you are not showing up as authentically within your career life, within your public life? Is there something you've been holding off and you're scared to do it, or you are not sure yet? That is all the pressure between your career and your identity and self, public identity and yourself. And maybe Saturn in your first house, because I have that too natally, has made you feel like you've got to be responsible before you act on certain things, or the weight of responsibility has been put on you that you either don't want to be a burden, or anything to do with career is where that square is putting pressure on. So only you can answer that for yourself. Like, I can't answer what that is for you, but it is going to put pressure between how you show up differently within your career and your public self versus identity. You're welcome. So I feel like that's it. Yeah, I feel like I've got nothing else to say. And I am so proud of myself for being on here because I talked myself out of it about 3 times today. But yeah, anyway, I know that one of you have joined the workshop live. I had quite a few people join the waiting list, and I was really pleasantly surprised because I honestly didn't think many people would. I've done it at 6 PM just because that really does actually work for me. Um, but because a few people have emailed me, um, because 6 PM in the US time is basically in the middle of their work, I want to make it accessible. So either I will record it live and hopefully everyone's okay to do that. If not, then I will um, send an email out with the definite time if I have changed it. Anyway, thank you so much, and I am going to go now. Thank you all.